Hey, what's going on, guys? Over the past couple weeks, there has been a lot of discussion about what's next for the middleweight title picture, who will take on Sean Strickland next, and there's been discussion around two names, Khamzat Chimaev and Dricus Du Plessis. And Khamzat Chimaev recently fought against Kamaru Usman at UFC 294, where he won a majority decision, and we'll talk about that fight in a little bit, but he was guaranteed a title shot off of that Kamaru Usman win. And with that performance against Kamaru Usman, it was a very hard-fought fight. I believe that Khamzat Chimaev has become the most underrated fighter in the UFC. Yes, I said underrated fighter in the UFC. And it's just crazy because I feel like nobody's even talking about this. And also, I feel like truly, Khamzat Chimaev is suffering from some of that bias that I've talked about in the past, where people hate certain fighters because of the region of the world they are from, whether it's Chechnya, whether it's Dagestan, whether it's just Russia in general. There is definitely a bias amongst the MMA community that hates on certain fighters because of where they're from, and we're going to discuss that in this video as well. But you look at Khamzat Chimaev's career, because I want to go over his career, because Khamzat Chimaev at one point in time, I believe, was the most overrated fighter on the roster. And I don't mean overrated as disrespect, because a lot of people think, oh, if you say someone's overrated, that means they suck. I mean that fans' expectations don't match up with what we've actually seen proven in the cage. That's my definition of overrated. You can be very good and you can still be overrated. But if you look at Khamzat Chimaev's early UFC career, he came into the UFC, he starts John Phillips, who's basically a bum, not even in the UFC anymore. He starts Reese McKee, who's an okay fighter. He just returned to the UFC and lost another fight. But again, not a great win, but he went out there and starched him. Then he goes out against Gerald Meerschaert, a little bit of a step up in competition, and also that fight was at middleweight. One punch KO. That's a solid win. That's a solid win there. Nothing crazy. The hype at this point was unbelievable. It was so crazy, and the UFC wanted to capitalize on it. The hype was so crazy that they booked him against Leon Edwards 3 times. And the reason they booked him against Leon Edwards at this point in time, we're talking late 2020, early 2021, is because the UFC was desperate to have Khamzat Chimaev fight for the title. So he was unranked at the time, and Leon Edwards, I think, was ranked in the top 5. It might even been the top 3 for Leon Edwards. The UFC thought, okay, if Khamzat goes out there and beats Leon Edwards, we're giving him a title shot. And Leon didn't even want to take the fight for a bit. Then he finally accepted it, and it got canceled 3 times because Khamzat Chimaev, I think originally Leon Edwards got sick, then Khamzat Chimaev was sick, so the fight just got canceled and never ended up happening. Then when he returns late 2021, he fights Li Jingliang, who is a decent step up in competition from Gerald Meerschaert, but again, this is in the welterweight division now. He goes out there and dominates Li Jingliang, picks him up, carries him over to Dana White, and then chokes him out. And I mean, this was an utter domination. I've talked about it plenty of times. Sometimes, even when great fighters, they're not fighting the best competition, it's how they perform. I've talked about it for a while. I was high on Islam Makhachev for a while. Even though he wasn't fighting the best competition, what he was doing to them in those fights was incredible. And that's exactly what Khamzat Chimaev did against Li Jingliang. That was an impressive win. After that, he's finally booked against a top contender, and that's Gilbert Burns. He goes out there, first round, he won the first round. It was a very competitive fight. I don't remember which round I gave which for 2 and 3. I gave one of those rounds to Gilbert Burns. I believe it was the second round I gave to Gilbert Burns, but I'm not 100% sure. But nonetheless, Khamzat Chimaev wins the decision. It was a close fight, but I thought Khamzat Chimaev won. The majority of people thought Khamzat Chimaev won. And to beat Gilbert Burns, who at the time was ranked top 5 in the welterweight division, people were ready to give Khamzat Chimaev a title shot. They were saying, oh, he's definitely the guy to beat Kamaru Usman. And unfortunately, because of a different turn of events, it ended up never happening. Because the UFC ended up booking Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards that summer. And there was talk, okay, Kamaru Usman beats Leon Edwards, he's going to fight Khamzat Chimaev next. But they wanted to keep Khamzat Chimaev active, so they booked him against Nate Diaz. Khamzat misses weight. He ends up fighting Kevin Holland. And then you have Kamaru Usman over the summer get head kick KO'd against Leon Edwards. That fight never happens. So after the Kevin Holland fight, where he absolutely ragdolls Kevin Holland and Darce chokes him, he sits out for basically over a year. And at this point, the Khamzat Chimaev hype is incredible. People are talking about him dethroning Israel Adesanya. People are talking about maybe he could go back down to welterweight. He could be 2-weight champion. And even before he officially committed to middleweight, there was talks of people saying Khamzat Chimaev could be 3-weight champion. He could win the welterweight title. He could win the middleweight title. He could win the light heavyweight title. And at this point in time, and it was around the Gilbert Burns fight, around the Kevin Holland fight, the hype for Khamzat Chimaev was insanity. I thought he was a very good fighter. I thought he was a proven fighter. I thought these wins over Gilbert Burns and Li Jingliang and ragdoll and Kevin Holland and finished him in the first round, I thought were very impressive. But I thought the level of hype in terms of people saying, oh, he's definitely a double champ. Oh, he's definitely a 3-weight class champion, which is just crazy to even think of. Maybe it's a slight possibility, but people saying that is just insanity. And what people did were set unrealistic expectations for Khamzat Chimaev. They acted like Khamzat Chimaev was completely unbeatable. They acted like Khamzat Chimaev was this godlike fighter, like a mythical fighter, just because, oh, he beats Gilbert Burns, he beats Kevin Holland. Don't get me wrong. Again, I'm very high on Khamzat. I would have picked Khamzat against Kamaru Usman at welterweight before Kamaru Usman lost to Leon Edwards. So it's not like I'm disrespecting Khamzat. I think he's a great fighter. But people had these otherworldly expectations on Khamzat Chimaev. Well, Khamzat's booked to fight Paulo Costa at UFC 294, and a lot of people were excited for this fight. Paulo Costa pulls out a couple weeks before the fight. Kamaru Usman, former welterweight champion, steps in. Now, Kamaru Usman on a 2-fight losing streak, coming off, just 2 fights ago, getting sent to the Shadow Realm by Leon Edwards, where he lost his title. And now he's stepping in on 2 weeks' notice, which I actually believe was a little bit longer than 2 weeks' notice because they knew Paulo Costa probably wasn't going to make the fight. But nonetheless, Kamaru Usman steps in. And I talked about it in the lead up to the fight. I hate these short notice fights because no matter what, there's an asterisk next to him. And sure enough, this is one of those matchups, the same with the main event, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski. There's always going to be people discrediting no matter who wins. If Kamaru Usman would have won, it would have been like, well, Khamzat took a different stylistic opponent on short notice. If Khamzat wins, it's, oh, Khamzat beat a washed-up welterweight who came in on short notice. This was a solid win for Khamzat Chimaev, and this is coming from a person who thought it was arguably a draw. Okay, what Khamzat Chimaev did to Kamaru Usman, especially in that first round, was unbelievable. We've never seen anyone do that to Kamaru Usman. Anyone. And you look back at Kamaru Usman, I know people like to act like Leon Edwards outclassed Kamaru Usman in the trilogy. That's just not the case. It was arguably a draw in the trilogy fight between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. So in a different universe, Kamaru Usman was still welterweight champion. And also, Kamaru Usman's always staying in shape. He seemed like he had the better conditioning against Khamzat Chimaev. But because now you look at the context and you say, oh, Kamaru Usman on a 2-fight losing streak, Kamaru Usman coming on short notice, and the otherworldly expectations of Khamzat Chimaev, the fact that it was arguably a draw, the fact that Khamzat Chimaev just won by majority decision is kind of a letdown. Now, me going into this fight, I picked Khamzat Chimaev by finish. I thought Khamzat Chimaev would find a kill shot on the feet, probably in the second round. But I said, the closer we were getting to the fight, I was leaning more and more to a hard-fought decision victory, and that's exactly what happened. Kamaru Usman is such a good fighter. He's hard to finish. I mean, think about it. Leon Edwards landed just the most perfectly placed head kick. Other than that, Kamaru Usman has an excellent chin. Kamaru Usman's super well-rounded. And Khamzat Chimaev went out there against a fresh Usman in the first round and literally ragdolled him. Almost got a rear naked choke. But because he didn't get the finish, now people are delegitimizing the win because it's on short notice. This win over Kamaru Usman is a very, very solid win. We've never seen anyone treat Kamaru Usman the way Khamzat Chimaev did. I understand it's up a weight class, but still, I think you still have to give Khamzat Chimaev credit for the way he beat Kamaru Usman. And now you have a lot of people complaining because in the lead up to this fight, Dana White said, look, the winner of Usman versus Chimaev will fight for the middleweight title. They will fight Sean Strickland in 2024 for the middleweight title. And I see a lot of people crying and whining and saying, what about Dricus Du Plessis? What about Dricus Du Plessis? And Dricus Du Plessis undoubtedly deserves a middleweight title shot. I'll say that right now. I believe Dricus should be next in line. But you look at the factors of all the different title shots given out in 2023, and you look at the fan base's reaction. Oh, Colby Covington skips over Bilal and fights Leon Edwards? No big deal. No big deal at all. Oh, Merab's getting skipped over? No big deal. Oh, Stipe's getting a title shot instead of Sergey Pavlovich? No big deal. We don't care about that all that much. And that one's a little bit That one's not the same as the others. There is a little bit of backlash for Stipe, especially with the injury. But before the injury to John Jones, there was nothing. And then you look at, and I can't believe this one. I even have to use this one. But Sean Strickland getting a title shot against Israel Adesanya. And I know people are going to say, well, it was the only option. Well, it was the only option because the UFC made it the only option. Dricus Du Plessis got skipped over for Sean Strickland. And there was no backlash about that. The only backlash was, oh, well, Dricus isn't getting to fight the winner. That was the only backlash. There should have been backlash that Sean Strickland was getting an undeserved title shot over Dricus Du Plessis. And I've heard people say time and time again, justifying different title shots. You know, oh, well, this guy's a draw or that guy's a draw. Why aren't you applying the same argument to the Khamzat Chimaev fight? Let's be very clear. Khamzat Chimaev is a bigger draw than Dricus Du Plessis. 100%. Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev is a bigger fight than Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis. There is no debate about that. So why all of a sudden is the fan base, and I feel like it's the majority of the fan base, crying and whining, how is Khamzat Chimaev getting a title shot over Dricus Du Plessis? He beat Robert Whittaker. Wow. Well, just use your own logic. Use your own logic. You didn't have any complaints when Colby Covington stepped over Bilal Muhammad, who's on a 9-fight win streak, beating top contenders. Meanwhile, Colby Covington hasn't fought in damn near 2 years, hiding in witness protection. You didn't complain about that. You said Colby's a draw, which isn't even true, by the way. And then you have other title shots, like Marlon Chito Vera stepping over Merab Dvalishvili, which this isn't official yet, but it's basically official. They just kind of recently, there's been some reporting of Henry Cejudo versus Merab Dvalishvili. So all information points to the fact that Merab's getting stepped over and getting skipped over for a title shot. Why is there no outrage about that? It's only because Khamzat Chimaev might potentially leapfrog Dricus Du Plessis. And I'm telling you right now, and I've called this out plenty of times, there is a large portion of the fan base, or I won't even say large portion, there is a significant portion of the fan base that hates certain fighters because of the region of the world they're from. There is certain portions of the fan base that just don't like any of the fighters from the Caucasus regions of Russia. Whether you're from Chechnya, whether you're from Dagestan, whether you're just from Russia in general, there's a lot of the fan base that are like, we'd rather see Dricus Du Plessis. And there's a lot of people, I'm telling you right now, and I've talked about this before, I don't think Dricus Du Plessis meant anything when he was saying the first real African thing, but there is a lot of racist fans that have like attached themselves to that, and they feel so strongly about that, and they made it into such a big topic. And I believe both sides kind of did that, but it's this weird thing where, oh, how dare Khamzat Chimaev, the guy from Chechnya, jump over Dricus Du Plessis? How dare he get a title shot? And you look at Dricus Du Plessis, let's be honest here, and I didn't even realize this until I started looking at the resumes for the video. And this is kind of going to be a hot take here. Dricus Du Plessis literally has a garbage resume outside of the Robert Whittaker win. And I know we can't exclude that. And again, I already said this before in the video. I think Dricus Du Plessis deserves a title shot. If it's up to me, I am making fights based on a meritocracy. I am giving Dricus Du Plessis the title shot. But you look at his resume outside of Robert Whittaker. You got Derek Brunson, literally a dead body. And Derek Brunson was super competitive, was dominating Dricus in the first round. You have Darren Till, made it competitive. Darren Till's a dead body. He's gone out of the UFC. Both guys are going out of the UFC. Brad Tavares is probably Dricus' best win. Outside of that, you're looking at Trevin Giles, Marcus Perez. I think Trevin Giles is still in the UFC, just losing to people. I don't even think Marcus Perez is in the UFC anymore. Dricus has a horrible resume outside of the Robert Whittaker win. Now, granted, Khamzat Chimaev doesn't have a great middleweight resume considering he beat Kamaru Usman. You know, that's not as good as a Robert Whittaker win. But outside of that, I think he has overall, if you count both weight classes, I think Khamzat Chimaev has a better resume. So when you look at these two fighters, I don't think it's egregious to give Khamzat Chimaev the title shot. In my opinion, Dricus deserves it more. But why is it the fans are only complaining because Dricus is getting stepped over? Why are they only complaining about that? Meanwhile, you have guys like Merab, guys like Bilal, guys like Sergey Pavlovich, which now that situation's a little bit different, that clearly have earned their title shot. They're getting stepped over for guys who clearly don't deserve the title shot. But when you have Chimaev and Du Plessis, okay, maybe Du Plessis deserves a title shot, but Khamzat Chimaev is like, what, a couple steps behind, maybe 2 steps behind? It's not like they're worlds apart in terms of deserving a title shot, but the fans only want to cry when fighters they like get skipped over for title shots. They don't care about a meritocracy. They claim, oh, well, this guy's a bigger draw. Every fan that ever says that, first off, I want to punch him in the teeth. But every fan that ever says, Well, of course he's getting a title shot. This guy's a bigger draw. Do you get a cut of UFC pay-per-view? Someone please tell me. Do you get a cut of UFC pay-per-view? I would love to know. You justify the UFC's decision-making based on who has drawing power like you get a cut of the UFC pay-per-view revenue. I would love to know. Let me know down in the comments. And I'm just so sick and tired of hearing this weird narrative like Khamzat Chimaev isn't good. He literally ragdolled Kamaru Usman. He was ragdolling Kamaru Usman, and he took it on short notice. Why doesn't he get credit for taking Kamaru Usman on short notice? That is a drastically different style matchup than Paulo Costa. Why doesn't he get credit for that? Of course he's not going to have as good of a performance because he didn't train for Kamaru Usman. Paulo Costa doesn't have great grappling. Paulo Costa is primarily a volume striker. Then you have Kamaru Usman, who's has amazing wrestling, has great power, has evolving striking. It's not that great, but he has decent striking, has a decent jab, and has unbelievable cardio, even on short notice, which is the main factor that people look at when short notice fights, and Kamaru Usman had better cardio. How is that not a good win? How is that not worthy of a title shot? But meanwhile, people are acting like he literally beat a bum. People are acting like Khamzat Chimaev beat a bum when he beat Kamaru Usman. It's just crazy to me. And on top of that, Khamzat Chimaev had a torn ligament in his hand. It happened in the first round. I know there was some talk of broken hand, broken wrist. There was something wrong with his hand in that fight. So we have to give him a little bit of leadway and say, okay, well, that wasn't his best performance, but look what he did in that first round. If you don't find a title shot, a Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev fight, if you don't find that compelling, I don't know what to tell you. That is a super compelling fight, especially considering how good Strickland's cardio is. And ultimately, I think Dricus Du Plessis gets skipped over. And I'll be the first to complain about it. But that doesn't change the fact that a lot of the fans are only mad when it's a fighter they like that are getting skipped over. And they'd rather have Dricus Du Plessis than Khamzat Chimaev from Chechnya fighting for the title. And they're going to say, undeserved title shot, meritocracy. But they don't care any other time. They don't care when it's Bilal. They don't care when it's Marab. And also, they're not going to use the same argument. Oh, Khamzat's a draw. They're not going to say that because they want Dricus to get a title shot, and that's it. They only care when it's a fighter they like getting skipped over. And ultimately, I think he does get skipped over. I do think we will see Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev. But for me, Khamzat Chimaev went from the most overrated fighter on the roster. I thought he was good, but the expectations were just crazy, to one of the most underrated fighters on the roster. Imagine going out there and ragdolling Kamaru Usman for a significant portion of the fight and being told that's not a good win. That is insanity to me. They set these high expectations that were impossible to meet for Khamzat Chimaev, and that's why they were kind of let down by his performance against Kamaru Usman. Anything less than a first-round finish for Khamzat Chimaev was just, it didn't meet expectations. That's essentially what happened here. But I think Khamzat Chimaev gets the next title shot. I think Khamzat Chimaev is a bigger draw than Dricus Du Plessis. But ultimately, what I would like to see, Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis. I would like Khamzat Chimaev to take another fight. Maybe try to book the Paulo Costa fight one more time. Winners fight each other. But then Adesanya is going to be in the mix as well. I wouldn't mind seeing Adesanya versus Chimaev. That'd be crazy if that happened next. That's never going to happen. The UFC will make Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev next. They are vindictive towards certain fighters. They are mad about Dricus Du Plessis turning down the title shot with, in their minds, a minor injury. I'm telling you that right now. Dana White expects all fighters to take fights regardless of injury. They knew how big the Adesanya Du Plessis fight was. The UFC is going to be vindictive. Du Plessis is going to have to fight another fight. Whether it be Dolidze, whether it be Jared Cannonier, he's going to have to fight another fight. It's just the way the UFC acts. So have the amount of outrage you have for Du Plessis. Have it about all the other fighters that get skipped over for title shots, even when it's a fighter you don't like. Be consistent. That's all I have to say. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.